All right.
If you don't mind.
I don't mind at all.
Yeah, 'cause there's a lot of regulations I don't understand.
Well, most of Revelation is wrote symbolically. No, 4 and 4 is the
I'm
last.
sorry, Revelations 4, 2 through 4, yeah.
That's the last time you see the church.
I didn't quite understand that.
Okay. Well, let's just read that again.
If you don't,
Yeah, that's
you
fine.
have to dwell on it.
No, let's just look at it. Now, see, up until this time, folks, you see where there was letters wrote to the church. Jesus talked about the church when he was here. The apostles all talked about the church, but after 4 and 4, you never see the church again on earth till it comes back with Jesus.
Now, are we talking Paul here in Revelation?
Do what now?
Who are we talking about when you're in Revelations 4 there? And this I looked and behold.
John.
John, okay.
John the Revelator. They say they put old John out on the Isle of Patmos. It was just a rock island out in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea. They didn't know what to do with John. Everything he tried to kill John, it didn't work. He just kept preaching Jesus, so they threw him out there on Patmos. And this is where he got the vision of Revelation, on Patmos. And so they didn't even shut him up out there on the rock. It's like God couldn't reach him on the rock, but he could. So then after this, now he just told John these letters to write to the churches, the 7 churches of Asia. And these were actual churches, folks. And they go, if you follow church to church, it would be a kind of a clockwise circle that he told John to write these letters to.
Did the churches follow the times?
Yeah, that's the reason.
What's going on now?
What's going on then? He gave John, and he told him exactly who to send these letters to first, and to what church, and what was happening in that church. And all these churches, like I said, they were real churches, but they also symbolized the whole church age. You notice there's 7 of them. Well, there's more than 7 churches in the time of John, but he gave it 7 because 7 is the number of completion.
Yes.
And if you'll notice there that the last church, which depicts the left behind church, and most folks preach that is the last church, the rapture church, the end time church. No, it's the church left behind, folks.
Yeah.
The church, Laodicea, which means the people decide.
Yeah.
It's the left behind church. They decide what they'll teach. But it's the church of Philadelphia that represents the rapture church. And if you read that, you can see. But after he wrote these letters to the churches, John said this: "After this I looked, and behold, a door was opened in heaven, and the first voice which I heard was as if it was a trumpet, talking with me, which said, Come up hither, and I will show thee things which must be hereafter. And immediately I was in the Spirit, and behold, a throne was set in heaven, and one sat on the throne, and he that sat was to look upon like a jasper and a sardine stone, and there was a rainbow around about the throne inside like unto an emerald. And round about the throne were 24 seats, and upon the seats I saw 24 elders or leaders, clothed in white raiment, and they had on their heads crowns of gold." 24 in the church in the wilderness, or the Jewish nation, which was considered the church in the wilderness. There was 12 tribes. Mm-hmm. The apostles of Christ, they were 12 apostles. 12 and 12 is 24. What John saw was the complete church from the very beginning, all of them there, in 4 and 4. And if you look, it says that they was around about the throne. And out of the throne proceeded lightnings and thunders and voices, and there were 7 lamps fire burning before the throne, which are the 7 spirits of God. Now, these 24 elders are clothed in white raiment. They had on their head crowns of gold. And the Bible tells us that the church will be clothed in white raiment. Mm-hmm. And we will rule and reign with Christ. So this symbolically is the church. John saw the whole church there, sitting around the throne of God. Now, what John was seeing again was a vision of the way it was going to be. And after that, after Revelation 4 and 4, you don't really see the church on earth anymore until it comes back with Jesus. Now, what you see on earth after that is the tribulation saints that is kicked off with the sealing of the 144,000 Jews, and then they'll begin to take the last gospel message. But this is the church that's already there. Now, let's look over here. I got a little marking here. I don't really know what it says, but let's look at it. Let me find it again. 5, 9, and 10.
Revelations?
Mm-hmm. Well, we're back up to 8. We'll start at 8. And when he had taken the book, the 4 beasts and the 24 elders, this is the ones we just saw, fell down before the Lamb, every one of them having harps and golden vials full of odors or incense, which are the prayers of the saints. And they sung a new song, saying, Worthy art thou to take the book and to open the seals, for thou wast slain, and hast redeemed us to God by thy blood out of every kindred, tongue, and people. Do you see this? It's symbolic. The 24 is symbolic. They're saying here that, hey, we come out of every kindred, every tongue, every nation. In other words, from the very beginning, they came from the very beginning out of the generations of men, and has made unto us our God, and has made us unto our God kings and priests. Now, what was the promise to the church?
We shall
Rule
rule.
him. Peter said we would be kings and priests. Same thing here.
Right.
And we shall reign on the earth, and that was the promise of Christ, that we would reign with him on the earth. So that is the 24 elders. And like I said before that, you see where they writing to the church, where they preaching to the church, and after this, you don't see the church anymore until she comes back with Jesus in the end of Revelation. She will come back with him. Now, even the prophets talked, I believe it's Zechariah that talked about the Lord would come and said he would come with 10,000s of his saints.
Yeah, 11,000 times 10,000.
Yeah, the prophet said that they would come, they would come with Christ. So if they're coming with Christ, folks, it means he has taken them out of the earth at some prior time, folks. I mean, they didn't die and filter into heaven one at a time. Now that's
That verse number 11 is talking about angels, not people.
verse 11.
It does say beasts and elders.
Yeah, and it says the elders.
And I beheld the voice of many angels around about the throne, and the beast and the elders, and the number of them was 10,000s times 10,000s and thousands of thousands. The angels was there, the elders were there, the beast was there, saying with a loud voice, Worthy is the Lamb that was slain to receive power and riches and wisdom and strength and honor and glory and blessings. But what we just read there is made us unto our God kings and priests. He never promised the angels that they would be kings and priests. He promised the church. See? Revelations 1 and 6. Look at the promise to this church. Chapter 1.
Verse 13, now it says,
Well, Revelation 1 and 6, let me get this right quick. Has made us to the 7 churches which are in Asia. It starts out 1 and 4. And it said, 1 and 6 says this, and has made us kings and priests unto God and his Father. To him be glory and dominion forever and ever. So that's our promise. What was the one you was looking at?
I was looking at the
And every creature which is in heaven and on earth and under the earth and such as in the sea, and all that are in the heard I saying, blessed and honor and glory and power be unto him that sitteth on the throne and unto the Lamb forever and ever. In other words, he's saying all creation is giving praise to the King and to those that.
I've always wondered who you are
You're right.
that we could dwell in.
You're right. Behold, I'll make all things new. But see, there'll be 1,000-year reign here in this earth.
Is that what that means?
Well, see, it talks about all these beasts.
Yeah.
I saw a thing one time where a fellow was writing it, and he said, more beasts than you see in a zoo. And that's why he's writing about all these beasts. That's things that we hadn't saw. There's some crazy-looking beasts as far as we think in our mind, but they're there. And these beasts that's there are intelligent. They're not like our dog or our cat. I mean, these are intelligent beasts. Oh, well, yeah, on the new earth, you bet. Well, again, see, we get mixed up about heaven. What we see mostly, and folks call it heaven, no, it's the government seat that comes down on a new earth. See? When he, a lot of times we don't think about stuff, but when he made man, where did he put him?
In the garden.
He didn't put him in heaven. He put him on earth. He never told Adam that one of these days I'm going to take you to a better place, because that was the best place he had for Adam, was where he was at, till Adam messed it up, folks. It was a replica of what his house looked like. So, but when Adam messed it up, he messed it up good, didn't he? But that's the end of the church in 4 and 4. We're talking about beasts. Look at that 4 and 6 before we go.
Here,
Revelation 4 and 6. Look at this. We're talking about them animals in heaven, or beast. And behold, and before the throne there was a sea of glass like unto crystal. And in the midst of the throne and round about the throne were 4 beasts, full of eyes before and behind. That's a funny look. And the first beast was like a lion, the second like a calf, the third like the face of a man, and the fourth beast was like a flying eagle. And the 4 beasts had of them 6 wings about him, and they were full of eyes within, and they rest not day nor night, saying, Holy, 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 Lord God Almighty, which was and is to come. I heard a preacher preaching that one time, and he said what he thought was that every time that these things looked at God, they saw a different aspect of him. And they just cry out, holy, giving him praise, because, hey, God's too big to fit in this little 9-pound gray matter, I can tell you that, folks. He's awesome.
But one day we'll see him for ourselves.
One day I'll see him for myself. Ought to be a song in that. I hope I can. You pray for me hard, and I might can do that.
I'll pray for you too. I'd love to hear
I'd have to break out the words again. I can't even remember how it goes. Can you remember how it goes? No. Is it all right, Tom? Tell me, did you have anything you want to add to this?
do what now?
Was that all right? What we just see? John saw that, and again, something we need to look at. 4 and 4 is before the first seals of judgment was opened. What was it, Joe?
Well, you were saying that there weren't any more mention of
The church.
the people, but in Revelation 5, it says, in the 4 and 20 elders fell down and worshiped.
That's what John just seen there. They're in heaven. He's seen this in the vision. Well, like I said, it's not on earth. You don't see it. It's not mentioned on earth again.
Oh, okay.
See, they're in heaven.
Understood.
Yeah, see, yeah, it's John's seeing all this in heaven. So when you go back where it starts, and I behold, and the door was open in heaven. So all he sees there is in heaven till
Yeah.
now chapter 6. He begins to open.
I got another question.
Okay.
How do you relate that to being no more mention of people on earth because it's talking about heaven?
No, the church, not people.
Church.
There's plenty of
Well, I'm
people.
considering the church people.
Yeah.
Aren't we the people? Aren't we the church?
Yeah, but all people ain't the church.
I understand that, but the people that talk about as the church is the church. Is
Yeah,
people.
yeah, it is people. And the church, though, is gone. Before the great,
That's what I'm asking. How do you relate that the church is gone?
because all right, what we just saw to start with there, John names the churches he's writing to. John names the churches he's writing to in Revelation where it starts. Right. Church at Sardis. Paul, when he's writing, he writes to specific people, to the church at Corinth. Right. You know, so it's the church is a body of believers. Right. But that church is gone off the earth. You don't see it back on the earth, the church. You don't see anybody mentioned it. No letters wrote to the church. Nobody mentioned in the church again until it comes back with Jesus.
So what would you?
You see, the judgment starts in chapter 6.
But in your parts in there where it says, "Hold back the winds until I mark my."
Yeah,
people that
yeah.
don't wanna hurt?
Again,
So wouldn't they be part of the church?
no. Again, we have to go back and start. Like I say, the Bible is the book, only book that I know of that proves itself. Now, we studied this here a few weeks back about Daniel's vision of the end time. God gave him that vision, and he said 70 weeks are determined upon your people, which were the Jews. Okay? And then he gives the exact time limit for when Jesus is going to die on that cross. And when Christ died on that cross, the Jews rejected him. The Spirit of God moved to the Gentiles, and he began to gather out of the people of what we call the Gentile church. They came to Christ because the Jews rejected him. And I mean, you know, as you study the Bible, you see that all the way through. But there is 7 years left that God will deal with the Jewish people as he did before they rejected Christ. That's according to Daniel's prophecy. 7 years left. And in that 7 years is these years of tribulation, which he'll seal that 144,000 Jews, and they'll carry that last message. And the people you see after 4 and 4 will be people that they have won here in the tribulation period. The church, the great tribulation is poured out upon a unrepentant earth. Now, they didn't go in the rapture, but they get saved during the tribulation, and they're here. The earth will go. I mean, the earth will continue just like it is.
So those will be
Well, when see, while you was vacationing, we talked a little about that. We talked a little.
When the Jews know it, the Antichrist.
When the Antichrist sits down in the temple of God and says,
Part of the 7 years, right?
yeah, when he's
3.5 years.
yeah, when he sits down in the temple of God and says, "I'm God," then the Jews will begin to reject him.
3.5
You got 3.5 years. We read that a few weeks ago too as we were studying this, where it says you know how long he's got. The Bible tells us how long he's got, and then Paul tells us that the Antichrist will be destroyed by the brightness of his coming, of Christ's coming. So those that know Scripture, that are here during the tribulation, when he sits down in that temple and says, "I'm God," they can count. He's got 3.5 years, and then Jesus is coming to destroy him. So that the second coming is not the no man knows the day or the hour that Jesus was talking about. That's the rapture.
Right.
The second coming.
Yeah.
So he
I
come.
got another question.
Okay.
I'll throw a wrench in all this.
No, I know. No, that's what it's all about. Hey,
All right.
I don't know everything, but I know a man that does.
You know, he was called up right there in his vision. He's seen. All right. Now, he said he's seen the 4 and 20 seats, and the seats said 4 and 20 elders sitting there,
Mm-hmm.
clothed in white. Okay, now you're saying that represents the church,
The complete church.
sir?
The complete church. The Bible calls the church that came, the people that came out of Egypt. It calls them the church in the wilderness. That was a Jewish nation.
But there's how many different churches we talking about here on this? Just one. Okay, so that represents everybody that's been called up. Is what you're saying? The church.
See, we look at everything here. If it's a religious organization, we look at it as a church.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Whole church as a whole. Period.
It's talking about the born again,
Okay.
blood bought.
That's what I'm just
Yeah.
seeing 4 and 20 seats and 4 and 20 elders sitting on them. Who are those elders? Do we know?
Yeah, it's the church. It's the church.
12 leaders of the 12
See,
tribes of
what we just read was he said we shall rule and reign. The elders had just said in the next. Where we read that at 5, that he has made us kings and priests. That was a promise to the church. So this is who they are. They are they're
We're sitting around the throne at that time.
yeah.
Okay.
See,
With them. It just didn't make that plain to me. I don't, of course I know.
again, see, the Bible is more than just a book here and a book there. It's a whole complete work, and so you have to put the pieces together from.
Well, for the average person, it's mind-boggling.
That's the reason he sent
A
us.
lot of times, I'll say something to somebody and then they'll come back with something and I ain't got an answer for them because, I'm still learning.
Hey, I am too.
Well, and I don't know what to come back with. All I can say is, let me ask somebody.
to catch on to what he's saying. You got the elders, and you got the apostles. That's the Jewish. Where are the Gentiles?
No, the apostles is part of the Gentile church.
The apostles was sent out to.
All the apostles were the Jews,
That all the apostles were Jews at that time.
and the elders you're saying were Jews.
No,
The apostles was sent
No.
out.
So you're saying the elders could be Gentiles?
it's the church that Jesus. Jesus told them before he left. He said, "Other sheep I have, which are not of this fold." In other words, they're not Jewish. Them I must bring, and there shall be one fold and one shepherd. And all of those that are born again, following after Christ, makes up his church on earth. The Bible calls the church the body of Christ. So it's those that are following after, doing what he has told them to do, blood bought. See, there's no other way to heaven except through Calvary. No matter how good we get. See, because sin done killed us all. It takes the blood of Jesus to have paid that penalty. So the church is, when Christ told Peter, up on this rock I'll build my church, there was a bunch of religious orders going on. He didn't claim none of them. He said, this is what I'm on. He said, I said to you that you're Peter, and upon this understanding, upon this rock, I'm going to build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. See, and we have this idea, though. I mean, it's easy to, we look around and see how things are, we think, well, now, that's how God always planned it. No, that wasn't how God always planned it. The early church was one organization in different places. Wherever you went, I mean, if they got outside of what Christ was teaching, they didn't count on the church. They counted them as heretics. They counted them as pagan worship. See? Now we accept anything. But if it's outside of what Jesus taught, it's not the one he left. And he's got to bring us, he will bring all the born-again people under this understanding. Before, when the rapture occurs, everybody that is saved, filled with the Spirit of God, looking for Christ, will go. They'll know.
But even in the first century of churches, they had paganism that was entering into the
Yeah, Paul warned about it. Hey,
Right.
it slipped, but see, he didn't count it as part of it. He said it slipped into the church. See, it was a called out group. He said, y'all let this stuff slip in, but it never should have been, and it was never embraced as such.
That's
You know,
what made it go down in the dark.
it went down in the dark ages.
Okay, another thing.
Pagan religions.
You said here a couple of weeks ago, you were talking about the first recognized Gentile being accepted into God's, where was that at? God's promise. In other words, you remember when you talked about it, we were discussing when the Gentiles were accepted after the Jews.
Yeah, Cornelius was he sent Peter over to Cornelius' house because he had give Cornelius that vision of Peter coming, and Cornelius accepted Jesus. But Jesus had told them, see, that, hey, I got other sheep, and I'm going to bring them. And now he wasn't saying I'm going to bring all the Jewish nation. He was talking about the Jews that was following him. He said, I'm going to bring them all together, and there'll be one fold and one shepherd. So, but when the Jews, the Romans was actually the one that carried out the execution, but it was the Jews that caused it. And I mean, that's prophecy too, and he even prophesied of
We're still in the Gentile phase. Once that, like you said,
we're in the Gentile dispensation.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and the Bible tells us, that talks about the close of the Gentile dispensation. So there comes a time when the fullness of the Gentiles come in. The way Paul worded it. He said, there's going to be a day when the fullness, in other words, there's not going to be any more Gentiles in this dispensation. One day, the last Gentile will come to Christ one day, soon, and what we call the Gentile dispensation will come to an end. The church will be gone, and the Spirit of God will move back to the flesh Israel.
Okay, now, they talk about the different churches back, I guess in the Old Testament. The 12 churches?
No. There was 12 tribes, but see, those 12 tribes were all under one law. There was 12 different tribes, but they were all under one law, all serving one God. And when Christ came and established the doctrine for the church, there was one church under one doctrine. He is. And like Joe said there a while ago, we see as you read the letters to the churches that people was creeping in, then trying to start a different thing on the inside. And Paul even said, if I or an angel from heaven teach you any other gospel except that which you've already received, count him accursed. He said, don't go along with this stuff. But it was already slipping in. And then in 325 A.D., when the Roman Emperor Constantine, the church had been growing, and Constantine's mother was supposed to have been a Christian. And Constantine, was the Roman emperor. He came in one day because he couldn't do anything with the church. If he locked one up, three stood up in his place, So he came in one day and said he had a vision of a cross in the sky, and it said, "Conquer by this." So he took his whole army down and baptized them in the river and said, "Y'all are all Christians." He baptized them into being Christians. Half of them folks didn't know what he's talking about, but hey, he was the Roman emperor, so they were Christians. And so in 325 A.D. in the Council of Nicaea, they got together and decided what they were going to teach. And as it rocked along, they elected them a pope, and the pope turned around and ordained the emperor of Rome as the Holy Roman Emperor, and the emperor turned around and ordained him as the Holy Pope. So the church and state become one. And if you didn't go along with today it's called Catholic. If you didn't go along with that church, they cut your head off. So we had a...
Right there, look, but even though if anybody rejected that, and they killed them, but in other words, they didn't have, this was before Jesus, wasn't it?
Mm-mm.
It was just after. So in other words, if they still hadn't accepted Jesus, then they're doomed still, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, see, Jesus established the doctrine, which is the church. He came and taught us the gospel of God. He said, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. But when Constantine decided that he was, and when they met at the 325 Council of Nicaea, the whole thing that went out was, we are going to establish a religion that everybody can be part of.
Yeah.
In other words, it wasn't no change.
It was already established, really, if they were following the...
Yeah, but everybody couldn't be part of it. You had to change to be part of it.
Yeah.
You had to accept Jesus. Constantine said, no, we're going to establish a religion that everybody can be a part of. And he's talking about with that,
Regardless of what you do. Yeah.
regardless of what, and that's, like I said, he baptized his whole army.
Just like what they're doing now.
Oh yeah, it's coming back full circle. But he baptized his whole army and said, hey, y'all are all Christians. And so much that was brought in, it's called Christian now, started with Constantine, not with Jesus. See? But they had two councils of Nicaea. And in that second council, they brought the statutes back into the, like under the law, they brought statutes in and started in all these ordinances. And
Now I got another question.
oh, go ahead. That's what it's all about.
I've always heard all my life, if a child or an adult has never been heard of Jesus Christ or how to get to heaven or anything, that he or she would. But that's what I don't understand. Is that's not true. That doesn't say that anywhere in the Bible.
They're lost.
But I've always heard that.
You see, they get that from
You
this.
never was taught the gospel of Jesus Christ that you were.
Well, see, they get that from this. Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh to the Father
Well, and I
but
understand that
by
now. I'm
me.
just saying, I've heard that all my life. That, if the gospel, we'll say over in Africa, if the gospel had never been taught over there, that you'd still go to heaven because you didn't know.
Well, look.
The Bible
gonna be
says
taught
it'll
in
be
all
taught
the world,
everywhere before
Yeah.
you come.
Well, see this too. Paul said this. He said, the grace of God that bringeth salvation has appeared unto all men.
All men. He's gonna appear to them at some time or other.
Yes.
Whether they do, accepted it or not. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
That's
see,
just-
that's
No, we serve a just God.
Yes, we do.
And he gave the best that he had so that man would not be lost. He's not out there just saying, hey, you lost.
Right.
No. Everybody is going to get that opportunity. Like I said, he sent that grace of God that brings salvation. See, we get tied up, hey, well, he's not doing this, and he's not doing that, and he's not doing that. When God put Adam in the garden, you know how many commandments he gave him? One. See, we put so much on us that Jesus never put on us.
Right.
We put on us. But
there again. What about an infant that doesn't know?
They don't know. No, they don't know. Responsible.
we'll have 1,000 years to teach him.
That's right.
And if they who dies has no to know.
But aren't they covered under their parents?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if the parents are saved.
If the parents are saved,
Right, whether their parents are saved or not, they're covered under the parents.
They will go to heaven,
When they're old enough.
they can't go in the rapture if the parents ain't saved, but they will go to heaven.
look, like I say, know this for sure, and we teach this around here all the time. Everybody knows this. God is absolutely good. Absolutely good God is not going to condemn anybody because they didn't know and didn't have a chance to know. That's out of the question, folks. Yeah, I had a preacher one time sitting on the front row of the church tell me that a baby that died before he was big enough to understand who Jesus was went straight to hell. I said, you got to be nuts.
That's right.
But see,
Because he didn't know
Doesn't it say
sin.
something in there about accountability, reaching the age of accountability?
It doesn't say anything about the age, but it says, he that knoweth to do good and doeth it not. So you have to, Jesus said this. Jesus said, if I had not come and spoken to them, he talked about the Jews. He said, if I hadn't come and spoken to them, they would have not had sin. He said, but because I have spoke to them, their sin remained. In other words, he told them what the truth was, and they said, we don't want none of that. He said, okay, now you're accountable for it. So there you are.
Once they know, they're accountable.
But he said, if they didn't know, if I hadn't spoke to them, they wouldn't have had sin.
Isn't there a verse somewhere, I don't know if it was Paul or who it was that said somebody was asking him a similar question, and he said, if the barbarian who dies without knowledge but has followed the laws written on his heart is justified in the sight of God.
Yeah,
He wrote the laws in every man's heart.
well, again, it comes back in our time. It comes back to that grace that lets everybody. Hey, folks, when the Europeans got here and found the Indians over here, the Indians were worshiping a great spirit. They knew that there was a creator. Now they didn't understand God. That's what preaching comes about. He sent preachers and he sent teachers and he sent the apostles and the evangelists to explain to people the gospel of Christ, to explain to people the promises that God has made us. But the church is not every building that you see with a church door with a sign hanging on it. The church is the born again believers who knows that they're not going to heaven without Jesus. And there's a lot of folks today that is committed to churches that's never committed to Jesus. See, I mean, they commit to the churches. Hey, they'll get all upset and mad. But, if you say anything about the church, the building they attend, but they never committed to Jesus. They ain't going to follow Jesus. They follow the church. So, that ain't the church that Jesus left. Jesus said, my sheep hear my voice and follow me. So what we do, we look at those. And you can tell if you're around folks for a while, you know what spirit's in them. And we preached a few Sundays ago about the spirit of the Antichrist that's moving. When you see men by the millions suddenly change the way they think and suddenly change the way they behave, it's the spirit working in them, folks. And so the spirit of Christ, if he's born again, he may not know a whole lot, but if he's born again, that spirit of Christ in there is going to change him. It's going to teach people how to love God and love one another. And if that's not in there, it's because Jesus ain't in there. See, a person gets saved, he might not know how he's supposed to wear his hair to please some denomination. He might not know how that he's supposed to quote so many Bible verses this week to please a denomination. But he knows that God has done something for him if he's saved, see. And so Jesus died for the church. And the church the Bible again depicts it as the bride of Christ. And so, like I say, our mix-up comes a whole lot because of what has come out of that Catholic Church. See, when the Catholic Church set up its Pope, the Pope then became man in God's stead. And there, in the idea of the Church, the ideology of the Catholic Church, the Pope has the authority to change Scripture. Not in this book, though. Matter of fact, you won't find Pope in this book. But so what they do, what Constantine set up, he set up a church that looked to a man. Matter of fact, for a long time, they didn't want the common man on the street to have any copy of the Bible whatsoever. You believe what they told you to believe. And as far as in their doctrine, that they had the authority to execute folks that didn't follow after the church, it was still on their books up to 1812. Still on their books. See, and a lot of folks believe, and there's some evidence that kind of leads in that direction, that when Columbus left Spain, supposed to be looking for the West Indies, that he was actually looking for a place for the Jews where that they could flee Spain, because they said he was a Jew. He didn't tell anybody, but he saw what was coming. See, in Spain started the Spanish Inquisition. That's the reason a lot of Jews now won't have anything to do with Christianity because of what people that under the name of Christianity has done to them through year after year after year after year. The Spaniards if the Jews would not convert to Catholicism, they took all their land, they took all their money, they killed them. They threw them in jail. They still wouldn't convert, they killed them. Either, in other words, you convert to Catholicism or you die. And see, that's happened over and over. And so the Jews look, rightly so, look at Christians, you know, like hey, what is their ulterior motive? Because they counted out, they think all those folks were Christians because they was naming the name of Jesus.
Yeah.
Folks, if you want us, and you know, the Islamic people, they'll bring that up now. Oh, y'all talk about what Islam's done. Look back what Christians has done. Now, if you want to see what the truth of a gospel, look and see what the leader taught. See? Anybody that comes along and says they're there, and if they're not following what the leader taught, that's not who they are. And that's the reason I tell folks today, there's no such thing as a moderate or a middle-of-the-road Islamist, because if you look what their leader taught, he taught exactly what the terrorist is doing. See? But see what Jesus taught. It doesn't make any difference what people come along and taught. Look and see what Jesus taught. If he didn't teach it, you don't hang that on him. Hang that on man.
I got another question.
Okay. Good.
I'm gonna question you out tonight.
That's all right.
Okay. Like, you know, say I die tonight.
Mm-hmm.
My spirit or the life that God gave me is going back right then.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, it says that no man has seen heaven. Which I won't be a man, then I will be a spirit. That's correct.
That's right.
No man has seen God.
I've seen God. Okay, that doesn't mean my spirit's gonna see God. But and then that spirit and that body, when Jesus comes, when that spirit will come back to have a new body. So but we are actually in heaven with our spirit.
We're a spirit. Well, we were born again. Oh, Paul said we've been raised up to sit in heavenly places. So the spirit, born again spirit, is in absolute harmony with the God that created it.
That breath that he breathed
But you know, and
that's our spirit.
it's like I said, the spirit is not. It's not the thinking part of you. That's the soulish part. The spirit is what God gave you. It's what made that soulish part kick in and start thinking. And the Bible said that the spirit goes back to God who gave it. Who knows?
But I will actually realize that with him in heaven at that time, or will I not?
What
Okay.
gave you breath is gone back, but your intellect will be sleeping.
Actually, I will be dead. Period. No
Sleep.
No sleep.
Okay.
See, Ecclesiastes said the dead knows nothing at all.
Do what now?
Ecclesiastes says the dead knows nothing at all. And it talks about his breath going away and he dies. See, and it's just like, well, you know, we always use that example.
And I understand that, but I was thinking that's when the body and the spirit will separate. And I was thinking you'd still, when you were in heaven, that you would still realize that you were in heaven, but your body would be there dead. That's what my.
No. See, the church will go to heaven all at once. No assembly required.
I just figured our body would join that spirit.
It will.
Okay, but
The spirit, he'll have you a brand new body. See, Paul called this a vile body. It's just not. It's just
I understand it. I'm just talking
Yeah.
about the spirit.
I know.
You see what I'm trying to.
See, that's the reason no man has seen God, because this flesh cannot approach unto a holy God because there's sin in this flesh. And I always tell folks it'd be kind of like stepping into the sun. Now you'd have melt immediately. You remember that story when Uzziah, when they went over to get that Ark of God? Remember that story? And God told them to put it on them staves, you know, and let the priest told it. And they decided they got a brilliant idea of putting it on that cart. But the Ark of the Covenant was in there, was on that cart, and it represented the very presence of God. And when that ark made a little bobble, and the cart made a little bobble, and that ark started to fall off, Uzziah was going to catch it. And when he put his hands on what was representing the very presence of God, he died. And it scared David so bad, he wouldn't even bring the ark on for a while.
Sin can't be where God's at. That's it.
That's the reason it took Jesus.
So Jesus paid for our sin.
You can't approach unto a holy God with sin. That's the reason it took our high priest to put you back. See, in God's eyes, you are who Jesus was because of what he did. We ain't got no reason to get our head big because, hey, there's nothing we could do to get back in the relationship with God without Christ because sin was in the flesh. And our spirit agreed with it because of what Adam had done, passed down to all his children. Let me tell you something, because what Jesus has done, it passed down to his children too. What Jesus did.
Yes.
So the Bible talks about us being made righteous. We were made righteous just like all of Adam's children were made sinners.
Right.
We were made righteous because of Christ.
Yes.
So, wasn't because we was that good, because he was.
Yes.
Because he was that good. So,
So when we die, we.
or asleep. The Bible.
Is going.
No, the spirit.
Spirit is going, and we're just gonna be dirt. We'll just dissolve.
Isn't that what the Bible said? From whence it came, and the spirit goes back to God who gave it.
Yeah.
That's what it says.
Yep.
And you hear that at funerals, and nobody. It seems like, hey, we don't grab a hold of that.
What a lot of people have trouble with in 92 is versus the soul versus that spirit,
Yeah.
pretty much.
See, when Adam was created, Adam's body was there. I mean, God had created the body, everything that.
Life into it.
But the body wasn't doing nothing until God's life entered it. It was just there. And he breathed himself into his spirit into Adam, and it said, and Adam became a living soul. Adam had a brain before he breathed that spirit into him. But the spirit of life kicked Adam into living. And Adam stood up in full knowledge of who he was and then who God was. So, and as the sin came, they had a perfect relationship. That's
When we get born again,
Huh?
it really is God breathed breath of life in us when we received him as our Savior.
same thing again. Same thing again. Same thing again.
You can't exist without Jesus, but
You can't live without him.
Jesus. You're not alive, really.
See, Jesus came and he said this. He said, I have come that they might have life and have it more abundantly. Well, he didn't come to give us what we already had. He come to give us what none of us had since Adam sinned. Because the Bible said if one died for all, it was because all was dead. In God's eyes, all were dead because of sin. And he sent Christ to redeem us back to himself, see?
Sinners reminds me of the people on death row, dead men walking.
They're dead men walking.
If you're not born again, you're alive, but you're not living.
But see,
Walking.
Dead in your sin.
let me show you what the devil had done, though. He told Eve, and we're getting into a sermon, but that's all right. He told Eve, he said, you shall not surely die. When he asked Eve, he said, has God said this? He said, well, you shall not surely die. Now, the question is, did Eve surely die or did she not?
She surely died.
She surely died. But we came along and we believed the devil. No, she didn't really die. She went somewhere else and still living. No, she didn't. She surely died, folks. And Adam surely died, and all of man since then has surely died. And it takes Jesus to bring back life. I mean, he wasn't kidding. He wasn't just making a pretty little verse where he said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. He wasn't making a pretty verse. He was telling you the truth. I am the life. I come to give you back what the first Adam took from, allowed the devil to take from you. See, man was not walking around with life in them since sin. They were walking around dying. They had no God life in them. They died. The Bible calls them asleep. You know, even in Jesus it says those that sleep in Jesus will God bring with him. That's what the way Paul put it. So, and see, folks, Adam, when he opens his eyes, it'll be like he just closed them. You don't know how long you slept.
That's right.
You ever lay down and took a nap, and when you wake, you know, you feel so rested, you think, well, boy, I slept 2 or 3 hours. You look at your watch, it's been 15 minutes. You just slept good. It'll be just like, but see, Christianity today teaches a bride going in pieces with some assembly required. You know, just kind of filtering in one at a time, you know.
I used to think that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's commonly taught in Christianity. That just filtering in. It just remind me when the kids was little, you go buy them toys, and then the night before Christmas, you in there. And boy, that's them dreaded words on the box. Some assembly required. Some assembly, you got to assemble all this thing. But the bride is not that way, folks. She'll go whole. And we'll do what?
I was watching a video the other day. It was the church that made it, but what they were doing was showing that the Lord came back. Rapture happened on Sunday. They still people sitting in that church.
Well, that's
Somebody didn't exactly get called.
It'll be happening.
yeah, it'll happen.
You're gonna see a bunch run to that church when it does happen too.
Yeah.
Well, the churches will fill up for the first day or two until the Antichrist says, "Hey, don't sweat it. I'm God," and then they'll follow him.
Yeah, they will.
But, well, what we're seeing right now, folks. Yeah, we see that spirit of Antichrist right now strong in the earth. And so, hey, what will it be when the church is gone?
I thought everybody that was not for Christ were antichrist.
Got the spirit, but there's one that's going to come. It's going to be a world leader. The Bible calls him the beast. Calls him the Antichrist, the Antichrist.
And I believe he's waiting in the wings right now. I told somebody the other day, everything that the Bible says to look for in Matthew 24 is in our newspapers right now. It's going on in our newspapers right now.
Well, I want us to look over there just a minute while you're talking about Matthew 24. Now, anytime, we start talking about what Christ said about the end times, we'll go to Matthew 24 and Luke 21. But Jesus said something over here in the 7th verse of Matthew 24. Now, we see things happening around us, and we say, well, that's the foundation being laid for the Great Tribulation. But Jesus called it the beginning of sorrows. The Greek said birth pains. And Jesus said this. Let's just read that.
Which verse?
7. Mm-hmm. He said, "For nation shall rise against nation." Now he's talking about the world situation, and again, folks, don't get mixed up with thinking that every little thing that happens locally fits in, because no, it's a global thing. It's for nation shall rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There shall be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in divers places. Now, that word nations there is the word ethnos, and it means ethnos. Huh? No, that's races. He said there's going to be some race problems. Kingdom is governments. Kingdom, it says nation against nation. That word is ethnos. In other words, different races. It's got problems against different races. The kingdoms is the governments. So they're going to be
Nation means races.
race. The races. That's the word ethnos. In Greek, it's ethnos. I believe is the way you spell it, and it means different races. So it's talking about there's going to be some racial strife. And hey, folks, we've had we not only just here but worldwide. And some of them little countries every once in a while, they'll just raise up and try to kill everybody that's of a certain race. And but the kingdom is the governments. And we've been blessed here as far as famines. We ain't had none in America in my lifetime. But you know what? With the change in weather patterns, and I'm not talking man-made global warming, I'm talking about they are changing weather patterns. In 2 years, in 2 years, if the crops wasn't grown, we'd be in trouble.
Yes.
We'd be in trouble.
Jerry, when you read verse 9, it
All
says,
right.
"Then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted." Who is the you right there?
Who's he talking to? He's talking to the Jews.
Jewish nation?
Mm-hmm.
The Jews asked him, "What's the sign of your coming?" And this is what he told them. You look for this, the Jewish nation, this is what you look for. That's why it says
So he came unto it. The Bible said he came unto his own, and his own received him not. Most of the time that Jesus was teaching, he was teaching I mean, he had lessons for the world, but he was teaching directly to the Jews.
Yeah.
But he said that these are the beginning of sorrows, or travail, or birth pains. If you look those words up in the Greek, and I believe it's in Luke 21 where it talks about after that they shall deliver you up. This says then shall they deliver you up, and he's talking about, and you shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. But the thing that's going to be happening is, again, is racial problems, government against government, famines, pestilences. That's diseases without cures.
You're talking about over here, you know, they're in New York. They arrested a woman 7 times for attacking Jews.
Mm-hmm.
And they turned her loose every time, and she went right back out and did it again.
There's no major crime to them.
Yeah, and they don't charge them no bail now, so they just turn her loose again.
You could take her head off one time, she'll quit.
Yeah. Let's stop that.
Run across the wrong Jew.
That's right.
We got Jews, we got Jesus in the Jews, so we part Jews.
Right, we're
Jack 'em up, Jack.
When you read in 24, if you chapter 24, you want to know who he's talking to.
Yeah.
You know, when he's telling them to flee, but in chapter 20 it says pray it's not on the Sabbath day. The only people who can't travel a long distance on the Sabbath day is the Jewish nation. The old law didn't allow them to travel.
But see, he's answering 3 questions in this whole chapter of Matthew 24. If you go back and stop, they asked him this: tell us what these things should be. He just told them the temple will be thrown down, and tell us what these things shall be, and what shall be the sign of your coming into the end of the world. Now, we talked about that a few weeks ago. There's a difference in the sign of its coming and of the end of the world. But there's talking about earthquakes in different places. They keep building and building and building. There's been 260 worldwide since January the 1st. It's been over 5.0.
Oh my goodness.
Do you think earthquakes is happening? And storms build up. So we just seen that thing in Nashville. We don't understand birth pains. We don't understand harvest, because as a whole we hadn't been taught it's what man sows. We've been taught God's just pulling strings.
Yes.
So man don't recognize anything as harvest. Folks, we're in the birth pains because of what man has sown. We've killed 60 million babies in the womb. And did y'all see Schumer when he was threatening the Supreme Court justices? We talked about it a little bit a while ago. But see, killing the babies in the womb is now a religion, folks. It's a religion. They get just fighting mad if you tell them, hey, you can't be killing babies. Hey, it's a right. So, as Jeremiah, I believe it was, said that they would break out in blood, would run together as blood. As we see all our children dying in the streets from drugs and all this, folks, it's because of seed that man has sowed, folks. Harvest is we are in the birth pains right now, and we see those things like the tornadoes, and they've been happening for several years. It's building up, and birth pains is not something that stops.
No.
They continue to they continue until something is birthed. These birth pains will bring forth the rapture, and it will bring forth the great tribulation. See, and it's happening now. But people don't see it. Jesus said eyes they have, but they don't see. Ears they hear, but they don't hear. And it's because we've been taught a different gospel. See? All this is happening because of man-made global warming. We can just all get together and stop it. Yeah. Yeah. It's happening because we've got a sin problem, folks. But when you, like I said, in pestilences, diseases without cures, you could think back 10 to 15 years, how many has came up, new diseases that they didn't know what was happening? You know, from coming back.
Another thing I just noticed right here in Matthew 24 and 14, it says, "And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations or races, and then shall the end come."
See, that was impossible in this day.
It's possible now.
Oh yeah, they've got the satellites up there now. But see,
You know,
and,
we're close.
oh yeah, and again, what both say was, the communist nation won't let you go in there and preach. He didn't say that the gospel would have to be. would stay there. Once you hear the gospel, it's up to you to make sure that you hand it down. See, he didn't say that they'd be teaching Jesus in every nation. He said it must be preached. And you see how he worded that? This gospel of the kingdom, the good news of the kingdom. The good news is that Jesus died, folks, and we have victory over the enemy. That's the good news. Too many folks preaching the bad news, not the good news. I heard a preacher. He told me this one time. He said, "I think we need to get back to preaching hellfire and brimstone every Sunday." I said, "Why? Why, folks? If you ain't going there, you ain't got to know everything about hell. I want to tell folks how not to go there. But you can get zeroed in on hell and to lose the whole message of the good news that you ain't got to go, folks. And God ain't sending nobody to hell. We send ourselves. He'll let you go. He'll sure let you make the choice.
He'll love you all the way to hell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is when the tribulation breaks loose. See, look at verse 16, Tommy. Well, let's just start at 15 and we'll read down. The birth pains will start, and it's going to come in and rest of stuff. It says, "When you therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whosoever readeth, let him understand." In other words, this abomination of desolation, he's talking about when the Antichrist steps into the temple and says, "I'm God." Then let them which be in Judea, because, see, this is when the Antichrist will turn totally and try to kill all the Jews, because this is when they will reject him. Let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. Now, who's in Judea? The Jews. Let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house, neither let him which is in the field return back to take his clothes. And woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. But pray that your flight be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day. And that's what Jackie was talking about a while ago. So they can, under the Jewish laws of the Sabbath, they could just go a few miles. That's as far as they could go. He said, pray it ain't on the Sabbath because you can't get away.
Now what's verse 19? Let's elaborate on that a little bit. And woe unto them that are with child, talking about a pregnant lady.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
What is that?
Well, look, it's gonna be hard on the Antichrist. And you can't buy it or sell.
Your kid's gonna die, you're gonna starve.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people, if it hadn't been raptured, then
they'll give in. But they'll give in. He said it's going to be especially hard on those that's with child, that's pregnant, because number one, you can't buy anything. And if it's on the Sabbath day, if you believe in the Jewish law, you can't go but just so far. So it's going to be especially hard on those. And this. Mm-hmm. A lot of things going to make it rougher than what it could be at other times. But see, the Antichrist will make a peace covenant with the Jewish nation to start with. But after 3.5 years, he'll break that covenant when they decided he ain't God, he ain't Messiah, and he will try to kill every one of them. That's what you talk about the Great Tribulation.
And Brother Jerry, like socialism and communism will be the ruling factor then?
Yes.
As far as women with child, you're going to not get any medical care, you're not going to have anything like that. Because socialism, you're on the back burner as far as medical care unless the government tells you you can have it.
But yeah, you see over there when he's opening those seals.
That's going to be part of it too.
Yeah, well, you see when he's opening those seals, and he said he saw this with the balances in his hand. It said a measure of wheat for a penny, and a measure of barley for a penny, and see that you hurt not the oil and wine. Remember that in Revelation? We can look it up if.
The oil and wine is the elite, pretty much, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the rich folks. In other words, he's saying under this Antichrist government, those at the top will have everything just fine. Say that you don't touch that, but we're going to the balances. We're going to give to the people what we think they need.
Yeah.
We will distribute. That's socialism at its best.
Bernie Sanders all over again.
The government will take care of you. Yeah. Anytime the government says, "Don't worry, I'll take care of you," you got a problem.
That's like when a doctor says it's gonna hurt a little bit.
Yeah. You think to get hurt?
It's going to be an ugly sting right here.
Yeah. But see, yeah, that the Antichrist government will be a government that would, you know, we read in the prophets, I believe it's in Isaiah, where he said, my hand has found the riches of the people, and I have gathered their treasure as a man gathers the eggs, you know. He said, and nobody opened their mouth or peeped. Right. So the Antichrist will demand all the wealth come to him, and he will distribute it from the government to the people, what he deems, you know, needed. But unless
old and feeble,
you're not getting it unless you take that mark. Unless you take that mark, you ain't getting none. That's exactly it.
Same thing Joseph done for the Romans.
Yeah, you can look over at Joseph. He is a typical.
Yeah.
See, on one hand, he was the savior of the Jew. On the other hand, he did exactly like the Antichrist is going to do. I mean, to the very last degree, he took control of all of Egypt's industry. He took the food supplies. He told the people where they could work and where they couldn't. He took everything they had, and then he moved them to where he wanted them to be, and then he took care of them out of the government. It's exactly what's coming out of the Antichrist. See, all these folks lining up wanting socialism right now and communism. Hey, that's his spirit, folks, and this is the birth pains that we're in right now. How long is this going to last before it breaks into a rapture? I don't know.
I think it's going to be more of a totalitarianism than it is a socialism.
Well, it is. It's dictatorial socialism.
Yeah.
In other words, he's going to be the man that says it all, but he will distribute to the people whatever he wants to distribute. You ain't going to do it on your own unless he says you can have it. You can't have it.
Right.
It talks
It
about
all comes through the government. See.
Yeah, there'll be one, but there'll be 10 under that one.
No, he's talking about those nations.
Mm-hmm.
See, and again, we talk about the one world government. People say, well, the government, we ain't even close to a one world government. Now, under the Antichrist, I mean, there's going to be Islamic governments. There's going to be governments all over, but still, it will be an agreement with him. Unless he says it goes, it won't go.
Do you suppose that the Antichrist is going to be more the ruler of the church or the supposed church? Not our church, but
The world church.
the world church.
He'll be that there too.
And the other government, the nations are going to be, like you said, ruling their own self. But
It'll have to go through
the
him.
Antichrist is going to be like the Pope.
Mm-hmm. He'll have to go through him. Yeah, see, you know, the Bible talks about the false prophet, so he will have a spiritual backing also, but it'll be a economical, a political, and a religious system, and he will be the face of it all.
Yeah.
So, right now we've got the World Court, and we got the UN that passes all these things, and that's just kind of little slivers of what's coming. See, there's different governments right now, all of the UN, representing the UN. They'll be the same way under the Antichrist. I mean, there'll be a Russia, there'll be a Cuba, there'll be this nation, but it won't be like we see it now. But nothing will move unless it goes through the leader, which will be the Antichrist. Nothing will, no buying, no selling. And right now, this virus, I can never say it. This coronavirus. See, our supplies is coming out of China. That's what folks is worried about right now, because that's where the disease started up at. But you see how it can disrupt government, the government supplies, because we're getting all of it from China, and a lot of governments are. So we're already so linked right now, as far as political. If something happens, you see the stock market's up and down according to what's happening in the world. So we're already, kind of got part of that system set up. But it will be, when the Antichrist takes his place, he will tune it to a fine perfection, folks. And unless you go along with what he says, ain't nobody going to trade with you. You ain't going to get no supply. So all I can say is don't be here. Go on that first boatload. When that trumpet sounds, as old John says, when you hear that trumpet,